Whoops. Hold on. Not supposed to go on yet. There we go. Sefirah of Netzach. Being persistent in our demands of prayer. There's a Hasidic teaching that you can learn three important things from a child. One of them is that they know what they want and they demand it vigorously. Another one is that they're happy for no particular reason. We won't mention when they're not happy for no particular reason, but we learn from the happy part. And the third one, they don't waste any time. They're always busy with what they're interested in and what they're passionate about. Amen. Welcome everybody to the next Sefirah, which is the Sefirah of TIFERET. TIFERET brings us into the home stretch because it is the third, counting from the top, of what we might call the big three, Chesed, Gevurah, and TIFERET, which are the upper three Sefirot of the lower seven Sefirot. And they're kind of special because there are different archetypes of three that appear in the tradition that are associated with Chesed and Gevurah and TIFERET. The most common one being the patriarchs of Abraham, Yitzchak, and Yaakov. Now, Chesed is very obvious what Chesed is, right? Because Chesed is loving kindness, and as we're going to do Chesed and Gevurah in the next 2 weeks, but just to give a little touch, because as I say a lot, it's really not possible to talk about a Sefirah completely separate from the other ones. So Chesed is loving kindness. Abraham represents Chesed, mostly because of his hospitality. Yitzchak is Gevurah, which means strength. It also is din, or judgment, discipline, and it has to do with limitedness, constriction, particularly in terms of spiritual practice, restricting oneself, like fasting, for example. And TIFERET, though, is the most ambiguous of the three. TIFERET is kind of like we talked about with Yesod, which is also a central pillar Sefirah, and we also had to kind of probe into it a little bit to get what it really means. TIFERET is sometimes translated as splendor and sometimes translated as beauty, but in Kabbalah it's become associated with rachamim, which is compassion, but also with emet, which is truth. And that's kind of strange because rachamim and emet, or compassion and truth, are not really the same thing. In some ways, they're almost like the opposite of each other. Like, in order to have rachamim, you have to a little bit ignore the truth. Because rachamim means that you're going to exhibit kindness in a situation where someone maybe deserves harshness. That's the difference between chesed, which is just plain loving kindness, and rachamim. If someone has done something and they deserve a harsh response, but you have rachamim on them, you have rachmanis, you have compassion, and you don't treat them as harshly as perhaps it would be within your right to do. So that's rachamim. But emet is like seeing the truth of something. So why is TIFERET both rachamim and emet? And also beauty. That's actually the primary meaning, is splendor or beauty. It's a word that's used, like, for example, in the beginning of Megillat Esther, the story of Esther on Purim, and it talks about the king Achashverosh, hard to pronounce that word, and his he creates a big feast, and it talks about all of the splendor that he's displaying in his kingdom, and it uses the word TIFERET in there. So what's going on with all these different meanings? So one way to see it is, I think, displayed nicely in a particular story. It's a story about Rabbi Yisrael of Rishon, and there was a time in the town of Apt where the Jews were in great distress. There was some kind of series of pogroms that were happening. The Jews were being attacked. It was a hard time, and so the Rav of Apt decided to institute a universal fast. Okay, so that was a common practice. It's still common practice in religious communities, that if you want something to happen, if you're praying really hard about something, then you take on some restriction like fasting. So this wasn't voluntary. He was proclaiming, he had the authority to the Jewish people that considered him their Rav to say, we are in a fast now, no rejoicing, just dawn to 3 stars at night, no food and no water for several days. And when Rabbi Yisrael of Rishon heard about this, he went and hired some klezmorim, Jewish musicians, fiddlers and drummers and clarinet players and so on. And he invited them to come and set up on his balcony and play during the day, during the fast. And during the day, as the musicians would play, the Hasidim would walk by and they'd hear the sound, the tinkling sounds wafting down from the balcony. And they would come and they would start to gather and they would listen to the music. And eventually they would get caught up in the music and they would begin to dance. So someone complained to the Rav of Apt. They said, do you realize what Yisrael is doing over there? You proclaimed a fast day, and he's turning it into a time of rejoicing. And the Rabbi of Apt said, what can I do? I can't criticize a person who is taking seriously the Torah's command. So what is he talking about? I'm going to share with you text that he quotes at this point. Here's the text. This is from Numbers, or Bamidbar, chapter 10, verse 9. Let me make this a little bit bigger here. V'chi tavo'u milchama ba'artzchem. When you come into battle in your land, al tsar hatzorer etchem, against the tsar, which here is translated as aggressor. Now this is an interesting word, tsar, because it's the same root as Mitzrayim, which is Egypt. And it means constrictedness. Okay, so this is a word that has an obvious metaphoric meaning to it. It can mean an outer aggressor, but it can also mean an inner sense of constrictedness. V'hareotem bechatzotzrot, and you are to sound the trumpets. V'nizkartem lifnei Adonai Elohechem, so that you'll be remembered before the Hashem, your divinity. V'noshatem me'oivechem, and you'll be delivered from your enemies. Right? So he's saying that that this is he links it with a commandment in the Torah which is talking about war, and he links it to their present situation where the people are in a kind of battle, in a sense. They're being attacked by the whoever they are, the Polish police or whatever, and they're going to, just like was the trumpets were sounded in battle, so can also that can be embodied by the sounds of the music. Now, it's interesting in this story that we have actually all three of those big three Sefirot, Chesed, Gevurah, and Tiferet in there, because the Rav of Apt first asks them to take Gevurah upon themselves, asks them to fast, right? And this is a normative approach to distress, to difficulty in Judaism, is to do something to restrict oneself in some way in order to set the balance right. It's like if you voluntarily take on suffering, then perhaps you can avert the suffering that you are somehow attracting to you externally. Take it on yourself, and therefore move yourself to the opposite side of the tree, which is chesed. But what happens? Rabbi Yisrael takes a different approach. He decides to create Tiferet, which is beauty. That's what the music is. The music is creating beauty, and through the beauty, invoke that rachamim. Right? So here we have the connection now. Why is Tiferet associated with rachamim? We can see in the story. And it's also kind of interesting that the actual description in the story we can see in a Kabbalistic way as well, which is that the musicians are up high on the balcony. And it describes the music wafting down, and what happens down below. The Hasidim start to dance and rejoice. What is that? When people come together and they dance and rejoice, that's, as we learned a few weeks ago, that's the Sefirah of Yesod. Yep, I saw Ruth's mouth move to Yesod. I saw you say it. That's Yesod. That's associated with both community, the foundation of community. That's the external dimension of it, and joy, which is the internal dimension of it. And they're both embodied in the story down below, because Yesod is seen as below, and Tiferet is transcendent. It's a kind of transcendent beauty, transcendent splendor above. It's also represented by the image of the sun, the light of the sun that's radiating out and shines, which is, of course, above us. And so, and so here, this is something that we really get this from human relationships, right? This is something that we've all experienced. I know for sure that there are times when maybe a person has wronged me in some way, and they come to me and they say, "I'm so sorry. I really am sorry for that." Well, immediately the rachamim comes out, right? If someone says they're sorry and they're like repentant about it, then I forgive them. But it also happens that they don't say I'm sorry, and they do something really cool. They do something that is delightful, and then I have the experience of forgiving them spontaneously because of that too. You know I'm talking about my kids. Sometimes there's that self-gevurah. Sometimes there's that self-awareness. Oh, I'm really sorry. But most of the time it's just something cute, something delightful that evokes that sense of compassion. And so the dynamics of the Sefirot and the dynamics of religious practice and prayer come from our direct experience in human relationships. Okay. So this leaves us with a question, though, still. Why is Tiferet associated with emet, with truth? We don't have that too much in the story. So let me put another little text on the screen. Okay, so this is a prayer. The beginning of the prayer starts out, Uva Letzion. That's why it's called that. Prayers are normally named by the first word or two. And this Uva Letzion piece comes in, it comes every day in Shacharit, it comes in Shabbat Mincha, it comes in Motzei Shabbat Mariv. And it's a long passage. It has a different version of the Kedusha in it. The Kadosh, Kadosh, Kadosh is part of that. But here's one little piece in that liturgy, which this text actually comes from the Talmud. And it says, Toratcha emet, which means your Torah is truth. Okay. Then it says, Titain emet li Yaakov, chesed la Avraham. Grant, it's asking, grant truth to Jacob and kindness to Abraham. Now, the context of this prayer is that Isaac, and I'm sorry, not Isaac. Isaac is the one that's left out here, actually. But when it says, please grant truth to Jacob and kindness to Abraham, it means to grant us those things because we are the descendants of those two people. So it's a poetic language that's saying, please grant these positive things to us. And because of this connection here in this prayer with emet to Yaakov, truth to Jacob, and chesed to Avraham, this is one of the early expressions in our tradition of connecting the patriarchs to particular qualities. This is hundreds and hundreds of years before any texts that we would call Kabbalah texts. But of course, Kabbalah is built on texts from the past, and at some point, Avraham, Yitzchak, and Yaakov become associated with Chesed, Gevurah, and Tiferet, which, by the way, the original litany of those qualities comes from the Book of Chronicles. And because of this connection of Abraham and to Chesed and Jacob to Emet, so Tiferet comes to also represent Emet. But okay, so but that doesn't show us what the connection is between Emet and beauty and the other qualities of Tiferet. So for that, let's take a look at our Parsha for this week. This is Parshat Ki Tavo. Make it a little bit bigger. Now these are a few verses we'll read. I'm going to read it mostly in the English, but I'll point out Hebrew as we go along. So this is Deuteronomy chapter 26:17 from Parshat Ki Tavo. It says, you say, affirm that existence itself will be for you as gods. Now, if you look at most English translations, it's not going to say gods. It's going to say God. I translated it that way on purpose because I think it's important, because that's what it actually says in the Hebrew. This is the name of God, Lelohim, for gods. Elohim is a plural word. It means gods. And the reason I think that that's important is because that was the message of the beginning of the Jewish tradition, was this message that the Elohim, that is the gods and goddesses of the ancient peoples of that time and that period, that the practice and belief of that area of the world, was that all of those different forces that are called deities are actually one divinity. They make up a oneness. That was the unique thing about Judaism at that time. Not to say that it didn't exist at all before Judaism. It did. The Torah even says that King Melchizedek met Avraham and talked about El Elyon, the Most High God. And we know historically about examples of different kinds of monotheism. But Judaism became, of course, the world's great source of monotheistic tradition. But monotheism is not even exactly the right word for it, because monotheism means there's only one God, but that's not actually what it says in the Hebrew. What it says is that this name of God, which is the Yud and the He and the Vav He, which comes from the verb to be, which means being or existence, is one thing, as we learned with our contemplation of Keter. All existence is, there's only one reality, only one existence. And all of the Elohim, all of the different forces are encompassed in this oneness. Okay, so that's kind of an aside. That's not really the point of what we're talking about, but it's something I like to remind. Okay, that you will walk in its ways. Again, Hebrew is a gendered language. You could translate this as his ways, but whenever we translate Hebrew, we have to make a choice. Are we going to use a gendered pronoun or a neutral pronoun? And I like to often use a neutral pronoun. I don't like the impersonal, materialistic sound of it, but I like the fact that it is more all-encompassing and not gendered. Okay, so you'll walk in the ways of the divine. You will guard the practices, the commandments, and the ethical rules. That's the chukav and mitzvotav and mishpatav. Chukav, as we talked about in a past lesson, has to do with spiritual practices, ritual, prayer, meditation, so on. Mitzvotav is a general, all of the practices. And mishpatav is particularly having to do with ethical things. V'lishmoa bikolo, and listen to its voice. So this is a way of describing the ancient covenant. This is the Jewish people's, or at that point the children of Bnei Israel, the children of Israel's part in the covenant is that they are saying, it's not just getting these mitzvot, it's saying that they will do it. Okay? And then Hashem affirms that they are to be an Am Segula, a treasured people, to guard all of its commandments. And then this is one of the expressions of the promise. Like, what is the fruit of engaging in this tradition? Well, Latitcha Elyon, that you will be exalted. Elyon means exalted. It's actually a name of God itself. It means transcendent. Above all the nations that were created, that were made. And then it says these three words. It says Litehila, which means for praise. Ulashem, which means like renown or famous. TIFERET. There's the word TIFERET right there, which is often translated as splendor. So these are the three qualities, and really these three qualities are all aspects of TIFERET. Let's check it out. Here we look at the words individually. Elyon is transcendent. This is really, if we look at it Kabbalistically, can be pictured as Tiferet in relation to Malchut. That is the transcendent, radiant, divine reality which is above mundanity. And we can, this again comes from real life experience. For example, if you look at something glorious in nature, like looking at a sunset from on top of a mountain, something like that, you get that sense of Tiferet soaring above perhaps other experiences of nature, like a dead mouse on the floor, which we had in our kitchen this morning, for example. It's true. Okay, that was different from the sunset from the mountain. Okay, Tiferet and Malchut, they're both parts of reality. Li Tehila, for praise. Okay, the Psalms in the Bible, the Psalms are called Tehillim. So Tehillah means praise, but in particular it means, or it has the connotation of singing. So we have the art, we have the musicians creating something beautiful. L'Shem, it literally means for name. It means like having a famous name, like being famous, right? And again, those who create beautiful music that we all know and love, they become famous. They're the celebrities. Latiferet, for beauty or for splendor. Okay, so how does all of this come about? How do we get all of these rewards? And this is the key, is that in our text, what it was saying is that it's not just for doing all these mitzvot. It's for doing it because we said we were going to do it. There's a covenantal aspect to it in the tradition, this idea that we are making a commitment with our words and then we're following through with it. And so therefore, we have the connection between the final connection, which is emet, which is truth. How does emet and rachamim and beauty all connect in Tiferet. And it's interesting because emet is not just often in a kind of juxtaposition to rachamim, right? Truth and compassion. In order to have compassion, like I said, sometimes you have to a little bit put aside the emet of the situation, not be so emphasizing the din, the truth, but also beauty. Also, beauty is a little bit in opposition to emet, right? Because you can create a beautiful exterior to things, and the interior can be something quite different. For example, in music recording, which is something that I have experience in, someone can sing something, and they can sing off key, and now starting somewhere maybe in the 1990s, we gained the ability to go in digitally and correct their singing off key. We can take it and we can move the pitch up or down a little bit and make them sound better. So what are we doing? We're hiding the emet, and we're creating tiferet. We're making it sound more beautiful. And we're not hearing the emet of how the person actually sings. So how is it then that emet and beauty that truth and beauty are connected? How does that happen in Tiferet? So there is another story about Rabbi Yaakov Yitzchak of Lublin, the seer of Lublin. And the story goes that he was davening one time in shul, and as he was davening, as he was saying the prayers, several times he took a little bit of snuff and snorted the snuff. I don't know if anybody here has had snuff. It's a funny thing because I had never had snuff either, but recently, or I don't know when it was, a year ago or something, we went to a bat mitzvah of a friend's daughter in North Carolina, and it was at an Orthodox synagogue, and I was davening, and a guy came over to me with a box of snuff, and I didn't even know what it was. And he gave it to me. He's like, take it. He was like, what do I do? I don't know what to do. And he showed me. He took a little pinch, and he snorted it. And I said, okay. So I tried it, and it had menthol, and it was very intense. It made my nose kind of explode. So this is still a practice. I'm sure it developed because cigarette smoking. Oh, it was in Atlanta. Sorry. Oh yeah. Okay. Cigarette smoking is a very prominent practice still in very religious communities, and you can't smoke a cigarette on Shabbos. So I'm sure that's where this practice of snorting snuff in synagogue comes from. But anyway, you're supposed to snort the snuff like in between the main sections of the davening. You're not like davening the Amidah or saying the Shema and you stop in the middle and snort some snuff. You know, that's not proper, right? But apparently in the story, the seer of Lublin was doing that. He was taking little pinches of snuff in the middle of major sections of davening. And so a fellow congregant came up to him after and he said, you know, that's really not correct. You're not supposed to interrupt the prayers. And he said, let me tell you a story. He said, once upon a time, there was a great king, and the king was walking out through the kingdom, through one of the city streets, and he came upon a street musician who was sitting on the corner in rags with an old broken down harp and singing his song. And it pleased the king very much. So the king said, come with me, I want you to come and live in the palace. So this peasant musician was brought into the palace, and he played day and night for the king, and the king loved it. But he still had his old harp with him. He didn't get some new fancy harp. He liked his old harp. So the old harp was didn't really stay in tune very long, and very often in the middle of his singing, right in the middle of his songs, he'd just have to stop and tune it up a little bit, and then start singing, and then a little bit he'd have to stop and tune it up. One of the other servants in the palace snapped at him and said, "You know, you could have just tuned it up before you started playing for the king." And the peasant said, "You know, the king has many wonderful musicians in his orchestra and in his choirs, but he picked me from the streets, and he chose to listen to me and my broken down harp. And so, since he chooses me and my harp, I assume that he is choosing its peculiarities and its imperfections, and mine as well." So that's a story about perhaps not putting pitch control on the recording, letting things be emet, letting things be true as they are, with their imperfections, and appreciating the beauty of them as they are. And that's what TIFERET is. So TIFERET is the place where truth and beauty and rachamim really all come together. Amen. All right. So we're going to look at, for today, a very famous high holiday prayer, probably the most famous of them all. Avinu Malkeinu. This is, of course, a plea for rachamim, for compassion, and it comes several times in the High Holiday Liturgy. Many of you, I'm sure, are familiar with the melody, and if you're not, it's not very difficult. This is a version that comes from the Jewish Renewal World, which includes a feminized version of the prayer, Imenu Mekorenu, our mother, our source, and asks for rachamim, for grace, for compassion, for mercy, admitting our own imperfections, right? So that's the emet aspect of it, and of course we're embodying beauty in the sense that we're creating this beautiful melody together. We do that for all of them, but again, these sefirot are not separable. They're all different aspects of the same thing. Okay. So sing along with me when you can. Avinu Malkeinu, Avinu Malkeinu, Chonenu v'aneinu, ki ein banu masim. Aseh imanu, tzedakah v'chesed. Aseh imanu, tzedakah v'chesed ve'hoshienu. Imenu mekoreinu, Imenu mekoreinu, Choninu vaninu ki ein banu masim asimanu tzedaka v'hesed asimanu tzedaka v'hesed v'hoshienu adadai adadai ayo yo ayananai nai nananai nai nai adadai nai 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 Hi, nai, 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 nai. Ay, 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 yo. Ay, 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 ay. Nai, 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 ay, 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 yo. Ay, 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 na, na, nai, 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 ay. Oh, nai, ay, ay, ay. And preparing to come into meditation, bringing your body into a comfortable but alert position, preferably with your back as straight as you can. So not leaning back and falling asleep, unless you really have to. But then you'll miss the meditation. You'll get some rest, but you'll miss the meditation. And bringing your right hand to your heart, taking the kavanah, the attitude of offering awareness to the fullness of whatever is present right now, whatever appears in your consciousness, both in the inner world of thoughts and feelings and in the outer world around you, all appearing in consciousness now, simply giving your attention lovingly and benevolently to the fullness of this moment with lecha, and a long out breath. Deep breath in, lecha. And bringing your left hand to your belly, feeling awareness down into your organs, soaking into all the cells, healing, life-giving energy of gratitude, shining down from your belly, down through your legs to your feet and toes, and shining up from your belly back into your chest, heart and lungs, shoulders and neck, upper back, flowing down through your arms to your hands and fingers, connecting back to your heart and belly, filling your whole body with light, shining into your face, facial muscles, bringing a little smile to your lips to express this benevolent generosity of presence in the body. The light of awareness saturating your brain, flowing down through your spine, branching out through the inner tree of life of the nervous system, filling every corner of your body with the light of presence, resting awareness on the flow of your breathing, letting go of the stream of thinking, and anchoring this body awareness with na'aseh, deep breath in, na'aseh. And bringing right hand to your forehead, awareness shining out into space, into the world around you. Noticing the sounds, the light, the objects, beings around you. Expanding awareness to fill both your inner world and the outer world, and noticing that in your awareness there is only one world, one field of consciousness within which all perception is present right now, and everything we perceive is not separate from the awareness that perceives it. And you are this field of awareness. You are this vast, silent, borderless, boundless field, beyond all perceptions, beyond all emotions, beyond all thoughts. You are this vastness. Venishma, deep breath in. Venishma. And kissing fingers, relaxing your hands. Atahu, Atahu, Atyahi. You, Hashem, are the truth of being. You are the reality ever present now. As this consciousness that we are, there is only the divine Atahu, Atyahi. Atahu, Atahu. Continuing the chant in your mind, Atahu or Atyahi or both, but the main thing is anchoring your thinking mind in the vibration of the tefillah. Noticing thoughts as they come, accepting them but not getting drawn into them, not pushing them away, but just letting them dissipate, bringing yourself back in tshuva again and again to Atahu, Atyahi. And we'll sit in silence for almost 10 minutes. And closing the meditation once again with the three portals, bringing your right hand to your heart and taking the attitude of giving awareness as an act of love, giving awareness as an act of benevolent attentiveness to the fullness of this moment with Lecha, deep breath in, Lecha, and bringing left hand to your belly, feeling awareness shining down into your organs and shining out from there, downward and upward to fill your whole body with the light of presence, making your body into a temple of awareness. Na'aseh, deep breath in, Na'aseh, and bringing your right hand to your forehead, awareness shining out into space. Vast, boundless field of consciousness that you are. Venishma, deep breath in. Venishma. Kissing your fingers, relaxing your hands. As we come into this week of Shabbat, Ki Tavo, which means when you come in, when you enter. May we enter in ever more deeply into the temple of the heart and the temple of the body. May we come to be grounded in the recognition of our essence as spacious freedom. O say shalom bimromav, hu ya'aseh shalom aleinu v'al kol Yisrael, v'al kol yoshvei tevel, v'imru amen. Amen. And I want to share something with you here. Okay.
Sometimes it's dark, too dark to see, and I feel like I've been knocking on heaven's door. Knock, knock, 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 knocking on heaven's door.
beloveds, what else is there to say? All the prayers have been prayed, and we're here, Baruch Hashem. We made it, all of us together.
Amen.
I am unmuted. Brian, I just wanted to say thank you. This was beautiful, and I really needed this.
Oh,
So thank you, and love and healing to you and your family and everybody here.
thank you so much, Pearl. Thank you for saying hello. Um, Pearl and I have known each other for so many years. Pearl came to the very first Torah of Awakening gatherings many years ago, back in 2006 or so, something like that, in Berkeley. She was there every week with strawberries from her garden to share with everybody. And it's great to hear you, Pearl. Thanks for coming on.
Okay, good. So, I'm calling in from Tijuana.
Oh, wow. Cool.
So the application of truth and beauty and their action. So I'm thinking of how I could form and redouble and intensify my appreciation of people's imperfections, and choosing to appreciate the beauty of their imperfections, and not not feeling sad or intolerant of imperfections. And the imperfections is the truth part of it, because in fact we are imperfect. So then the beauty is the TIFERET. So can you comment on that?
Yeah, no, that was beautiful. That was a great takeaway. And, you know, that the teaching that you just said was expressed in the different stories. And we can also, it also brings in that quality of rachamim, that sometimes we feel the impulse of what we would call din, means judgment, that we notice imperfections and there's that impulse toward din. And so this is a big part of being conscious, is just being aware of that impulse, noticing it, and choosing to mix in some rachamim, some understanding. You know, as I mentioned before, the Pirkei Avot aphorism that says "Al tadin et chavercho, al shetagia limkomo." I think I said it right. It means don't judge a person until you've walked in their shoes, so to speak. Don't judge a person literally until you reach their place. And again, their place is, the word for place is makom, which itself is a divine name. And so the inner implication is that each person has their own special way of serving the divine. Each person has their unique thing. That was the street musician, you know, with his broken, not broken, but not so fancy harp. And to just bring that in, bring that to mind with how we relate to people. And that brings in that rachamim quality, and that also the appreciation of their beauty, which is present even in the truth of the imperfection. So I'm just re-saying what you said. That was great. Thank you.
Thank you for bringing in the din.
Yeah.
Yeah, that's what I was trying to grasp for. So thank
Yeah.
you. And mixing in the rachamim.
Yeah. It's not to say that din is bad and we should throw it away. It's just to say that it has to live in context of those other things, and we have to always balance it. There's an idea in Kabbalah that din, or I should say the source of evil, is when din gets disconnected from the other things. So we still need the din, obviously. We need judgment, but it needs to be balanced and connected with these other qualities.
And din is spelled Dalet Yud Nun.
For din, yes.
Okay. Okay, thank you.
Yeah, absolutely. I think, and Ruth has her hand up. Ruth, would you like to unmute yourself there?
My comment was about similar to Jackie's, but it was just that it was so great to hear the conclusion of that story and the reason that Emmet is part of TIFERET, because I was wondering, and and it's just such a perfect explanation. And I my mind is very habitually returning to judgment of myself and others. It's a big habit of the mind, and TIFERET has been a little hard for me to resonate with. So
Yeah.
this really, it helps. TIFERET seems so big. It's like, well, I don't feel that radiance, something. It seems too like more than when I'm feeling more limited. I find it hard to grasp radiance, but to think of the imperfection, the perfect imperfection of ourselves is helpful, very helpful.
And
Yeah.
others.
And others. Thank you. Yes.
Yeah, some of the qualities are just straight ahead qualities, very easy to grasp. And TIFERET has these, just as Yesod has these different dimensions to it. And it doesn't really, if you just hold on to one of those aspects, you don't really get the fullness of what TIFERET is about. I think in the case of TIFERET, it's a little bit more helpful to think of TIFERET as a character, as a certain kind of personality which has a few different qualities to it that reinforce each other. Because on the surface, TIFERET is used the way it's used in scriptural language. It's often used to mean just like glorious, splendorous, radiance, beauty, and that's just a quality that we perceive, but it doesn't really tell us much about how we connect or embody that quality. And so it's when we connect it with the emet and the rachamim that we start to get a sense of what that really means. It's beautiful. Yeah. Kaveh, kaveh, kaveh el Hashem, kaveh, kaveh, kaveh el Hashem, kaveh el Hashem, hazak ve'yamet libecha ve'kaveh el Hashem. Baruch Hashem, Chazdei Hashem.
Next week, I have our daughter come in and blow the shofar, so I'll send her in right at the end.
Oh yeah, she should do it. She's the best. Everybody should have a wonderful week, or at least a safe and a week connected to your own inner resource of peace and healing in these difficult times. And I hope to see y'all again tomorrow morning for meditation. You're welcome to unmute yourselves and bid each other farewell.
Thank you, Brian.
Thank you, Brian.
Have a good week, everyone.
Thank you, Brian.
Thank you.
Thank you. Bye, everybody.
Bye-bye. Be well. All blessings.
Bye-bye.
Talking to Heaven's Door was great. Thank you.
Oh, wasn't that wonderful?
Thank God.
Have a good week.